We are live.
We are
Hello,
live.
everybody. If you're watching this, I want to welcome you to the first live hangout that we're doing as part of our Mobile Computing with App Inventor course. To begin with, I want to just congratulate you all of you who finished the week 1 app, and there's quite a few of you. It looks like it went pretty well. And you know, we're sorry if there have been some glitches for some people. It looks like the forum has been very active, and it looks like for the most part the teaching assistants and other staff members have been able to answer most of your questions. It's a pretty complex thing what we're doing, getting the App Inventor system set up, getting it to connect to our devices, as well as writing the code for the Hello World app. So you should be congratulated on getting all that to work. And that's just the first app we're doing, and it's a pretty sophisticated app that you created. One that's communicating between your mobile device and the Google Fusion Table server. So great work. Our guest this week is a very special person and a great friend of mine, Hal Abelson.
Yeah, hi, everybody.
Of App Inventor. So I'm going to let, and that's all I'll tell you about Hal for now. I'm sure we don't need to describe his many accomplishments, but I'm going to let Hal introduce himself for a minute, and then what we're going to do is I have some questions that I've pulled out of the forum for Hal that I'll ask Hal to reply to, and then you folks, I think you have in your Hangout interface, you can submit questions, and we'll try to get to some of those. We'll let this run at most a half hour, so if you want to ask a question, type it into the Hangout. But welcome, Hal. Thank you for App Inventor. Thank you for getting me involved with App Inventor, and welcome to our course.
Okay, well, hi, everybody. Again, I'm Hal Abelson. I teach computer science at MIT. I run the MIT App Inventor project and the service, which is what you're using now as part of this course. I started App Inventor in 2007, 2008, when I was on sabbatical at Google. If you can remember back in 2007, there kind of weren't any smartphones. And all this mobile computing stuff didn't exist yet. So one of the things that's really striking is how new all of this is. So there are, 2 billion smartphones around? There weren't any 8 years ago. And so one of the things you should realize is that you're at the very beginning of a giant change that's happening. And the change that's happening is not so much that people are learning coding or computing or all of the computational thinking that people talk about now, but that we're using that to really become part of our lives. So the compelling thing about App Inventor or other things that let you make apps for mobile phones is that you actually are interacting with something that's deep in your life and your experience. When kids think about that, it's part of how they interact with their friends, part of how they walk around, part of what they see. And this whole business is just starting and is very exciting. So it's great to see you guys here.
Okay, so Hal, we have a bunch of questions, but I want to first get in the question about the new program you're starting at MIT for master trainers. And do you have a slide that you want to show us about that?
Let me just put up the slide while I'm talking. The program we're starting at MIT, in a sense, builds off the course that you're taking right now. So here you're learning about App Inventor, you're learning how to make some apps for yourself. If you're a teacher, you're learning how to make some activities for your kids. Our program at MIT is meant to be for people at the next level who would be consultants to teachers in schools. And what it consists of is first taking this course that you're taking right now, getting certified in it, and then we're going to have about 10 weeks of self-study materials so you get acquainted with the other App Inventor curriculum that's around, and we'll have some discussion around that. And then we'll have a very intense 3-day session at MIT in March, where we'll talk about how you get kids involved in projects. We'll talk about some advanced App Inventor stuff. We'll talk about mobile computing in general. And the idea is that the graduates of this can become resources for schools and educators. So you can take a look at that. There's a link to it. When you go to the App Inventor page, there's a link to this course where there's a URL which you probably can't read in this slide, which is shortprograms.mit.edu/MMT for MIT Master Trainer. And that's something you might want to consider.
Well, thanks. That's an exciting program, and I just want to point out that for people who are interested in that, if you do enroll in the MIT program, what we can do with the edX course during the course itself is we can set up a cohort for the people who are doing the edX course with the plan to go on to the MIT Master Training.
Yeah, that'll be really good, and then that whole discussion can extend after this course finishes. Between when is this course finishing? November? Between November and through February for getting prepared for the live MIT session.
This course will finish December 7th. In the last week of the course, students are going to build their own app, an app of their own design, over the last 2 weeks of the course. So Hal, several people have written questions. Let me ask you the first one here. In your view, what is the future of blocks-based programming?
So in my view, there's not going to be any non-blocks programming in a couple of years, because for many applications, it's the obvious thing to do. What you're seeing now is, up until now, it's been hard to build these graphical interfaces, and now it's becoming easy. And when you think about making a programming environment, different kinds of presentations have different kinds of strengths. So blocks programming is really good for just throwing a couple of things together and flexibly playing with these things. It's not particularly good when you have very complex things, or you want to be doing something more textual for reading. And I think what's going to be happening is most environments are going to have the ability to switch back and forth between text and blocks. So at the moment, we're seeing a very transitional thing, in my opinion. But as graphics environments become better, there'll be places in almost every programming environment where blocks are the natural thing to use.
Yeah, I think just to add something to that, one of the points we try to make in the course is how highly abstracted App Inventor is. So having an app that listens for text messages, for example, is a matter of one block, one component, and a few blocks. And that's the kind of high-level programming languages that App Inventor shows are possible.
Yeah, I think there are sort of two pieces of it. People tend to focus on the blocks, but I think what's even more impressive are the services that are behind these things. So my favorite example in App Inventor is language translation. So, if I have a program in App Inventor that's doing something with language, you can easily put something up in another language. And that stuff, even 5 years ago, was a very, very advanced graduate school level kind of thing to do. And now beginners can do it, kids can do it. You just take it for granted because the service is up there.
We did it in our very first app. Our Hello World app uses the Google Fusion table.
Right, and you saw it's almost no extra work. And then you think about something that simply couldn't be done, say, even 5 years ago.
Right. Yep.
And I don't see this slowing down at all. There'll be more and more very, very impressive things that 3 years from now, people won't even think are impressive. They'll just take it for granted.
Here's another question, Hal. This has come up in different forms. What are the limits of App Inventor? I think they mean current limits at the moment, but perhaps also do you see any limits down the road?
Well, in terms of computational load limits. App Inventor doesn't make very, very large programs. That's partly because of memory limitations on the phone. It's partly because of memory limitations in your browser. So, people have made App Inventor programs with, hundreds and hundreds of blocks. That's not an easy thing to do when you're using App Inventor interface, but in any case, you're running across the browser's memory. In terms of the computational limits, they're kind of RNA, because at the end of the day, App Inventor is implemented as an interface to Java. And anything that anyone can write in Java, you can make a block that invokes that in App Inventor. In fact, what we're about to release at MIT is something called App Inventor extensions. They're not quite ready yet. But what that will allow people to do is you can make anything you can program in Java, and then you can put a block interface on that, and then you can distribute that for other people to use as an App Inventor extension.
Actually, interesting you should mention that, because that was one of the questions that came up. Is it going to be possible to extend App Inventor to components that you want to design yourself?
Yeah, give us a couple of weeks. We've actually got I think we almost have a test instance up for people to use, and we want people to play with it a little bit. There's some issues with other people making extensions. So, for example, if you make an extension that other people are going to use, you have to take responsibility for what happens when that's updated. So there's some things we have to work out in our process. But in principle, anything that you can build in Java on the phone, you can put a block interface in front of and make that an extension to App Inventor.
Hal, can I ask you a favor? Can you close your office door?
Well, I don't have an office door, but I'll try.
Well, it sounds like we can hear.
Let me see if I can go shut them up for a minute.
I have a bunch of questions in the QA list for Hal, but feel free to, if you're watching this live, feel free to propose a question, and we'll try to get Hal to address it. All right, thanks a lot, Hal.
I don't know that it'll be quieter, but I'm back at least.
Someone mentioned that they saw a new service a couple of weeks ago called Beetle Blocks, which uses Blockly, I think, and block-style program to develop 3D printable objects. Have you heard of that, and is that?
I sort of heard of it. I haven't looked at it. But again, it relates to the question about the future of blocks programming. What you're going to see is many, many different systems are going to have blocks interfaces on it. One of the things that's making that possible is really great work by Neil Fraser at Google, who's built a thing called Blockly, which is designed to be a system on which people can build lots of blocks languages. Neil actually wrote that when he was sitting in the Google App Inventor group. And he sort of used that, inspired by what App Inventor was doing, and said there should be a general blocks interface. So Blockly turns out to be a very nice toolkit. So code.org, for example, is using that for their programming environment. And you're just going to see more and more of these. As I said, once you get the basic idea of graphics around and it's easy to do, there's kind of no reason not to put a blocks interface on something.
So here's another one, a sort of related question. Do you see, what are the major limitations preventing App Inventor from becoming the IDE of choice for non-educational initiatives? So our course is really about teaching beginners how to program and getting them building apps. But what about for professionals? What are some of the major limitations you see?
So the major limitation right now is that when you get a lot of blocks on the screen, it becomes cumbersome and awkward and confusing. We're building some things at MIT that allow you to effectively put up sub-windows. So you can take a collection of your blocks that do a particular thing, put them inside a window and shrink that. That's one limitation. The other one is people just like the facility of what text editors can do. Doing things like replacing text, moving things around. That becomes problematic in a thing like App Inventor, which when we really designed it, I mean, Jesus, when I was thinking about the original App Inventor, I was imagining people would make systems with maybe 20 blocks in them.
Yeah.
And now we have people who are making programs with hundreds and hundreds of them. And that's stressing the interface. And so we're doing a couple of things like the sub windows that I mentioned, like the ability to have multiple screens. So people right now with multiple screens, the original App Inventor didn't have that. So these are all limitations that we're running across. And these are almost all interface limitations. As I said, the underlying computing is basically what's there on the phone, and is no different from anything else you do. But what happens is the interface makes it awkward to work with very large programs.
You want to mention how small the App Inventor development team is?
Right now,
Yeah.
so there are about 3 people working at MIT, and that includes writing the curriculum and maintaining questions and implementing the system and doing all of that. And then we have a lot of volunteers, people who are just critical and helping out. We have some students who are doing projects, but it's a tiny, tiny, tiny team. And we're always conscious of, there are lots and lots of requests for what we should do in App Inventor. And it's always pretty hard to pick priorities.
Right, so people in the course should be mindful of the fact that a very small team of programmers and supporters are providing this amazing service that we're all using in the course. So, okay, Hal, do you have any questions for me or us? Meaning, I can maybe try to answer questions on behalf of some of the people that have gone through week 1 of our course.
I'd like to know what kinds of apps people would like to build. Because for me, the interesting thing about App Inventor is the new things that people can do. So what makes me really happy is when people do things I hadn't thought of or imagined. So I'd like to know what people imagine is something they'd like to do.
Well, so I can't answer that directly because we haven't gotten to week 6 where we're going to see some of their ideas. But I can tell you what we've tried to do in the course is we're going to be building an app each week. And I've tried to pick app ideas that emphasize different features of App Inventor. So next week, starting tomorrow, we're going to be building a slideshow app. So we'll be using the camera, probably the image picker, image components. Week 3, we're going to build a walking tour app where we'll combine together location awareness and camera photographs and 4th week, we're going to build a version of Dave Wolber's Broadcast Hub. So using texting.
Broadcast Hub, yeah.
Using the activity starter, using email, all that in one app.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Last week, we're going to do a graphical version of the NIM game, so a game app. So hopefully that'll give people lots of ideas for cool apps that they can build themselves. What I really think is neat is the ability to build an app for yourself. That's practically useful, that you yourself want to make use of. So some of those work like that.
One of the things we're starting to play with, I've got a little seminar of MIT students. We're starting to play with App Inventor and all this Internet of Things that you hear about. So there are all of these, as you probably know, these devices that are coming on that can be linked to the web. You can write an app that turns a light bulb on and off. Should you care to do that? Or just almost any device you can think of in your home is now something that can be linked to the web, and we're building interfaces from App Inventor onto that. So I'm expecting a lot of new examples and a lot of new areas coming out of that.
Here's a new question that just came in, Hal. Can I freely distribute an App Inventor program I developed? Is it free source? I don't know if you can see it. It's at the very top of the QA.
Yeah. The thing you might want to look at is there's this thing nobody ever reads, which is called policy or terms of service. There's a link on the bottom of the App Inventor page, which sort of says that in legal language. But the quick answer to your question is yes. So the App Inventor code is open source free software code. And anything made with App Inventor code, neither MIT has no claim on any of that. So you can do that. And I mean, you can even distribute the entire App Inventor source code if you want, should you care to do that. But certainly you're free to distribute the apps you make. In fact, if you look at the actual terms of service, you'll see it explicitly said that you own the apps you make, and neither MIT nor Google nor anybody else has any property rights in that. In fact, the only thing we can do at MIT is basically do things to the apps you've stored for the purpose of maintaining our system and a little bit of research. But you own those things, and there are no constraints at all on stuff you built.
And I should add that in week 6, at the end of week 5, we'll be giving you some additional information on how to share your app, for example, through the Google Play Store or the App Inventor Gallery. We're planning to show you some of those things when we get towards the end of the course. So, yeah. So I think we have about 5 minutes left. Anything else you want to tell us, Hal, about App Inventor or about mobile computing that you think would be useful for us to know?
Well, for me, the interesting stuff about mobile computing, like I hinted before, are the services that it links to. So I used to, when I started doing this, I had this idea, that when I was building apps, I was programming an object like that. But the reality is what you're doing is you're programming everything that's on the web. When you link to something like the online speech understanding thing. So if you look at speech to text, what you're really doing is you're interacting with some of the world's most powerful computers. And certainly putting up other kinds of services that link to the stuff that you do in this little phone. It's not just this little phone. It's this little phone as a gateway to basically the world's computing resources. And that's the thing that excites me. And then when I think about what people will do with App Inventor, it's how do they actually use that kind of power, and particularly how do you put that kind of power into the hands of people who are not professional programmers? How do you democratize this amazing, amazing resource that's come into place? So, you tend to focus on programming my mobile phone, but just think about what's behind your mobile phone. And it's just mind-boggling and unlimited. So that's what I hope people will realize and understand, and then come to appreciate more and more and take advantage of that power more and more.
Yep, I mean that's absolutely true. I mean, among the other services we're going to be using in the course are texting, email service, the Google Static Maps service. So we're going to be learning how to use some of these other APIs to take advantage of the services. You're absolutely right. Mobile device is just the jumping off point to this amazing web of applications we can take advantage of.
Even the first example maybe you're going to do, which says use the location sensor and what's my address.
Yeah.
Right? So that sounds like a simpler thing. You take this block and you say, what's my address? But what's actually going on is that location sensor is looking at, the GPS satellites or a network infrastructure that says where things are located. It gets a latitude and longitude.
Yeah.
And it takes that latitude and longitude and sends it to another geometric server that translates that into a street address.
Right. Yeah. Amazing.
It's automatic, but imagine imagine the way people would have thought about that 10 years ago.
Right.
Right. Your first question: how do I make this immense database that maps latitude and longitude onto street addresses?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost unimaginable that you can do that. And now you just sort of say, heck, it's the location server.
Yep.
And we're going to see more and more things like that.
Okay, well, this has been really good. This is our first guest, and it's the perfect guest to have as our first guest, the creator of the programming language we're using. So I want to thank you, Hal, not only
Sure,
for being our guest, but also for giving us this great language to play with.
Right. So to everybody else, say happy inventing. And the main thing is to get your hands wet and sort of show that you can build stuff, even if it's the simplest, hello world of my cat. Show that you really can make something.
Okay, thank you, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Okay, so long.
Thanks, Hal. Bye bye.
Yep.
And for the edXers, I'll see you online.